You have 5 minutes to step away from the truck, or I'm placing you under arrest. That's what the sheriff shouted while gripping the butt of his holstered pistol. I froze. My moving truck was halfway unloaded. Sweat trickled down my neck from the scorching Texas sun. My hand still gripped the antique rocking chair my grandma left me before she passed. My dog, Cooper, was barking his head off inside the cab. Across the gravel driveway stood Karen, tight, ponytail, oversized sunglasses, holding a phone too, her ear still shouting even though the cops had already arrived. She's stealing, she's not the owner. I know everyone who lives here, and I've never seen her before. I blinked. My name is Madison Carter, and this ranch, it was mine legally, rightfully, fully paid for, and the ink on the closing documents wasn't even dry, I tried to explain, voice trembling. Officer, I just closed on this house last week, ma'am. Place the item down and show me some ID. Now I looked to Karen. She smirked. She actually smirked like this was some TV show, and she just caught the villain, except the villain was me. Just as I reached for my back pocket, something else happened. Something worse. Cooper, hearing the rising tension, managed to shove the passenger window wide enough to leap out. He raced toward me. "Dogs loose!" the second deputy yelled. Guns were suddenly unholstered. My knees buckled. That's when I knew things were about to spiral completely out of control. Where are you all watching this from? Because this mess, it happened to me just last month. But before we get to how I ended up nearly arrested in my own front yard, let me take you back to the beginning. When I first laid eyes on the ranch that would change everything, it started with a dream. Mine. After working 11 years in San Antonio as an ER nurse, I finally saved up enough for a down payment on a quiet slice of country life. I'd grown tired of city noise, parking tickets, and those crazy double shifts that left me seeing stars on my drive home. I wanted space, I wanted fresh air, I wanted to hear frogs at night and wake up to roosters, not sirens. I found the listing on a random Tuesday evening, a modest ranch house on 14 acres, white porch with green trim, a barn that needed love, some fencing that looked a little tired, but it had good bones, a soul even. And the best part, it was only 45 minutes from the nearest hospital, in case I ever wanted to pick up shifts again. The next Saturday, I took a drive out to Willow Creek Estates. Now let me say this, Willow Creek was strange from the jump. Not spooky or creepy, just tight like everybody knew everybody. The kind of neighborhood where folks mow their lawns at the same time and compete over Christmas lights. There was a big white sign near the entrance. Willow Creek Estates HOA, keeping standards high since 1992. That should have been my first clue. I pulled into the gravel drive of my soon-to-be ranch and stepped out. That's when I saw her, Karen, though I didn't know her name. Yet she stood at the edge of her manicured yard, pruning some roses, thin lips, platinum blonde hair, pulled so tight I was sure she hadn't blinked since 2008. She looked up, squinted, then tilted her head like a cat spotting a rat in its pantry. I smiled, waved. She did not wave back. "Can I help you?" she shouted across 2 lots. "Oh, hi, I'm Madison. Just here to view the property." Her eyes narrowed. "I wasn't told about any open house," she replied, wiping her gloved hands on a towel. "No open house." I smiled. "Private showing. I'm working with Jeff from Elk Creek." "Really?" She just nodded slowly like she didn't quite believe me. That was the first seed of suspicion, but I brushed it off. Small towns are like that sometimes. The showing went well. The house had creaky floors, peeling wallpaper in the kitchen, and a slight mildew smell in the hallway bathroom. But none of that mattered. It felt right, warm, familiar. Like I belonged there. I put in an offer the next day. 3 weeks later, I closed. I was over the moon, called my mom, my best friend Sasha, even my old high school principal, who once told me I'd never own land. With that attitude, I even bought Cooper. A little rancher hat on Etsy. The trouble didn't start until move-in day. I rolled up early, U-Haul, loaded coffee in one hand, Cooper in the passenger seat. I pulled into my drive just after 8 a.m. That's when I noticed her again. Karen, standing with her arms crossed like she'd been waiting all night for me. I waved again, even smiled. Nothing, whatever. I had too much to do. The movers were scheduled for noon, but I figured I'd get a head start. Unloading some valuables. My late granddad's record player, a box of nursing textbooks and grandma's rocking chair. I was halfway through my second trip when I noticed her standing at the edge of my property. Again, phone in hand, she wasn't talking. Yet just watching, I carried the rocking chair across the porch, pretending not to feel her stare. That's when I heard it, her voice rising into the air like a siren. Yes, officer, I think there's a theft in progress right now. She's emptying the house.
No, I've never seen her before. She doesn't live here. My blood ran cold, I shouted across the yard. Hey, I own this house. She ignored me. Just kept talking. She's got a big dog too. Looks aggressive. I dropped the chair. I was stunned. At first, I thought
she was bluffing. But 10 minutes later, 2 black and white sheriff cruisers pulled up fast, dust rising behind them. And now here we are, back to the start, officers, yelling guns, drawn Karen, filming with one hand, and still holding her phone in the
other. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my wallet, still holding the leash, as Cooper barked near my feet. One officer reached for my ID. He glanced at it, then his radio crackled. I couldn't hear what was said, but he lowered his voice and walked
away. The second deputy kept his hand near his holster, eyes on me like I might sprout wings and fly off. Meanwhile, Karen smiled like she was waiting for applause. 5 long minutes passed, then the first officer returned. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to need you to stay right." Seems to be some confusion. Confusion I had? Closing documents, keys, mail in my name. What confusion? Unless someone had messed with something behind the scenes. But who and why? And just as I was about to speak, a new car pulled up, sleek, black and familiar. Jeff, my realtor. He stepped out, face pale, tie. "Askew, I got your message," he said, eyes darting between the cops and Karen. I think there's something you need to know." That's when everything shifted, because the thing Jeff told me next, it made my stomach twist into
knots. And I knew this was only the beginning. Jeff looked rattled. His hair, usually slicked back like a news anchor, was a mess. He kept wiping his palms on his khakis as he approached. The officers turned to face him. "You the realtor?" the lead
deputy asked. "Yes, sir. Jeff McCall, Elk Creek. Really, I sold this property to Miss Carter here," he said, pointing toward Army. "Something's wrong. We need to talk." Karen scoffed from the driveway. "Oh, please, Jeff, this is clearly a mistake. I already told the HOA board last week. Someone was scamming houses online, probably some squatter situation. That woman does not belong here." Jeff turned slowly toward
her, his jaw twitching. "Karen, you don't sit on the HOA board anymore," she blinked. "Excuse me, you were removed 2 months ago after the incident with the Taylor twins." Karen's lips curled into a thin, ugly line that was never proven. The officer raised
a hand. "Enough, mister, from a call. Can you provide documentation that shows this property belongs to Miss Carter?" Jeff nodded. "Yes, I have everything in my car, signed closing packets, title transfer, escrow, confirmation, everything." He turned and jogged back to his car, fumbling with the trunk. Karen's expression changed. Her hands dropped. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. That's when I noticed it. That flicker of doubt, the tiniest crack in her confidence. But I wasn't relieved. I was furious. My dog was almost shot. I was seconds away from being handcuffed in front of my own home. All because of this woman's need to feel powerful. Cooper let out a soft growl beside me. He must have felt it too. The officer stepped away to look at the documents Jeff brought. The other remained nearby, eyes still watching me like I was made of TNT. Karen began backing toward her yard. Her phone was down now, her arms crossed again. Then she said something I'll never forget. I don't care what papers he has. She doesn't look like someone who belongs here. There it was. The truth. Not her version. Not her excuse. Not her phony concern for neighborhood safety. Just the naked, bitter reason behind it all. She didn't like the way I looked, that I didn't fit her perfect image of who should own a ranch in Willow Creek Estates, that I was younger, that I was single, that I didn't ask her permission to move in, and that above all, I didn't play by her rules. Before I could respond, the officer returned with Jeff. "You're cleared," he said quietly. "Everything checks out, Miss Carter. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding." I nodded slowly, trying not to cry. "I nearly lost my dog," I whispered. "He thought you were going to hurt me." The deputy looked down, his expression softening. "I understand again. I apologize." Karen stepped forward now, her voice shaky. "Wait a minute, that's it. You're just going to let us stay?" "She owns the house, ma'am," the deputy said flatly. Jeff added, "I emailed the HOA 2 weeks ago with the new ownership details, so either you didn't read it or you're pretending you didn't." Karen's face turned red, then purple. Without another word, she stormed off toward her house, her heels crunching over the gravel like angry thunder. I stood there for a long moment, unsure whether to feel relief or rage. Eventually the officers left. Jeff offered to help me unload. I declined. I just wanted to be alone, to breathe, to settle into what was supposed to be the happiest chapter of my life. I spent the rest of that day in a weird daze. I unpacked, slowly keeping Cooper close. Every now and then I'd catch a movement from Karen's window across the way. Her blinds would shift, a flicker of shadow, watching, always watching. But then something strange happened. The next morning, a woman I'd never seen before knocked on my door. She had a kind face, grey streaks in her hair, wore overalls, and smelled faintly of lavender. "Hi there," she said softly. "I'm Marlene. I live 3 houses down by the pond." "Oh, hi," I said, surprised. "Nice to meet you." She looked around cautiously, then stepped closer. "Don't let that Karen woman scare you off. She's done this before to others. You're not the first." My heart skipped. "What do you mean she's called the cops on 3 different families in the last 2 years, mostly newcomers? She just can't let go of the power. The HOA finally voted her out after she trespassed on someone's land and poisoned their vegetable garden, claimed it wasn't aesthetically compliant." I stared at her, stunned. "And she's still here?" Marlene shrugged. "Some people don't know when to leave." Then she handed me a plate of fresh cinnamon rolls. "Welcome to Willow Creek." She smiled. "Not all of us are monsters." That small act of kindness cracked something open in me. Maybe I could make this place home. Maybe Cooper and I could find peace here, even if we had to fight for it. The next few days were quiet. Peaceful. Even I planted wild flowers. I fixed the busted porch light. I let Cooper run through the tall grass behind the barn. But the peace didn't last long, because exactly 1 week after move-in day, I received an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just a plain white envelope tucked inside my box. I opened it. Inside was a printed notice from the Willow Creek HOA. It read, You are in violation of Community Landscaping Code Narramara 14. 2B, all front-facing garden beds must feature mulch or stone borders. Unapproved flora must be removed within 72 hours or be subject to penalty. Below it, written in blue ink, was a single word. Consider this a warning. No signature, no explanation. Just that my flowers, my welcome flowers, the ones I had planted with my own hands, the same ones Marlene had complimented the day before. And I knew, without a doubt, Karen wasn't finished with me. Not even close. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about that unsigned HOA notice, the phrasing, the handwriting, the timing. 72 hours to remove flowers for mulch borders. There were at least 4 other houses on my street with wild garden beds, Marlene's among them. I stared at the paper until the ink practically burned into my brain. Consider this a warning. I knew exactly who sent it, Karen, but here's the thing. Something inside me had changed since move-in day. Maybe it was the way the officer reached for his gun over a rocking chair, or the smug little smile Karen wore like a crown. Either way, I wasn't going to back down, not anymore. The next morning, I walked to the community board near the entrance of Willow Creek Estates. It sat under a plexiglass case on a wooden frame, usually holding newsletters, garbage pickup notices, and upcoming events. And there it was, tucked in the bottom right corner, a list of current HOA board members: President Joel Rivers, Vice President Denise Howell, Treasurer Anita Green, Member at Large, Vacant Secretary Karen S. Whitmore, removed by vote. March 10th. Removed. It was official. Yet somehow Karen still had access to old documents, or worse, she was printing fake ones to harass me. I snapped a photo of the board, then marched back to the ranch where I emailed the current HOA president, Joel Rivers. My email was polite direct. I explained the warning, attached a photo of the notice, and asked if it was real. He replied within 2 hours. Hi, Madison. That notice was not issued by our office. You are not in violation
Of any landscaping code, in fact Code 14.
2B was removed from our bylaws in 2021. If you receive any further false communications, please notify us directly. Welcome to the neighborhood, Joel. That should have been the end of it, but I knew better now. People like Karen don't back off. They escalate. 2 days later, I returned from the hardware store with bags of cedar mulch, just in case I wanted to play nice. But as I turned onto my street, I slammed the brakes so hard, Cooper jolted upright in the passenger seat. Someone had trampled. My flower bed crushed, torn, mangled petals scattered across the porch roots. Exposed soil, kicked like someone had danced in it. And on my front step, another envelope. This time, no paper, just a Polaroid photo. It showed my porch from a strange angle, like it was taken through binoculars or a zoom lens. You could see me kneeling in the yard, planting those very flowers. On the back, written in black marker, we're watching. My mouth went dry. This wasn't just a bitter neighbor anymore. This was targeted, personal, creepy. I looked across the street, then down the road. No one in sight. I grabbed the photo and rushed inside, locking every door. I texted Jeff, then Marlene, then Joel. Only Marlene replied right away. You need to document everything. Call the sheriff. Karen's pulled this sort of thing before, but never this bold. I hesitated. Would they even take me seriously? But Marlene showed up 20 minutes later, holding a steaming cup of coffee and a folder. Inside were copies of reports from past neighbors who had left Willow Creek under mysterious pressure, anonymous letters, HOA fines that didn't exist, landscaping sabotage. One couple even had their mailbox smashed 3 times before they moved to San Angelo. She's running a quiet war, Marlene said, her voice low. The only reason she hasn't been stopped is because nobody fights back. That hit me. I wasn't just a target. I was a test. If I caved, Karen would do it to the next person and the next until this entire neighborhood belonged to her silent tyranny. So I made a choice. That night, I bought motion sensor cameras from a tech store in town high. Deaf-in weatherproof, I installed one by the barn, another under the porch roof, and a third facing the road. Then I waited for 2 nights. Nothing happened until the third night at 2:17 a.
I had seen the camera by the barn captured movement. A shadow, tall hunched, carrying something in their hand. The figure walked up to the flower bed, began stomping, then paused, looked toward the porch and stepped out of frame, but not before the porch camera.
Caught a grainy glimpse of a face. Karen in pajama pants, hoodie, no makeup. Her face half lit by the porch. Light eyes, squinted with rage. I had her in full motion, time-stamped location. Marked, I emailed the footage to Joel in the sheriff's department. The next morning, that's when Joel finally called me. Not emailed, called Madison. He said, "Thank you for bringing this to light. I want you to know this is not what Willow Creek stands for. Karen's actions are dangerous and completely unacceptable." I nodded, silent. "We'll be having an emergency HOA meeting on Saturday," he continued. "I need you to be there." "Okay, but what happens to Karen?" He sighed. "That depends, but if the board agrees, she could be banned from participating in any neighborhood."
Oversight, possibly even subject to a restraining order. I hung up feeling something strange, hope I wasn't alone anymore. But then just when I thought the worst was behind me, Saturday arrived. The HOA meeting was held in the
Willow Creek Community Hall. Beige walls, folding chairs, lukewarm coffee on the back table. I walked in, expecting awkward stares. Instead, I got murmurs as whispering heads turned as I passed, some sympathetic, some curious, some skeptical. Then I saw her, Karen, sitting in the front row, calm, collected, wearing a pastel blazer, like she was attending a garden club brunch. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I didn't see smugness. I saw something more dangerous. A plan. Joel called the meeting to order. He reviewed the agenda, showed printed stills from the camera footage on a projector screen. Gasps filled the room. Marlene nodded slowly. The others looked stunned. "Karen," Joel said firmly, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" Karen stood, cleared her throat, then she smiled. "Actually, I do." She pulled out a folder, opened it, and said 7 words that made my blood turn to ice. "I have a legal claim on that ranch." The room froze. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above and the slow drip from the leaky coffee pot in the corner. My breath caught in my throat. "A what?" I asked, my voice low, eyes narrowing. Karen didn't even look at me. She was focused entirely on Joel and the board, as if I were just some mosquito buzzing in her ear. "A legal claim," she repeated, placing the folder on the long folding table in front of the HOA board, filed in county records. 2 days ago, I have a notarized affidavit asserting partial ownership of the land the Carter Ranch now sits on. Marlene blinked. That ranch has been in foreclosure and sitting empty for nearly 4 years. It was relisted, sold. How is that even possible? Karen smiled, that slow, poisonous smile, because if you read the fine print of the original parceling deeds, my great-uncle once co-owned a section of that property. Line before the Willow Creek subdivision was formerly zoned. Part of that acreage bleeds into what is now Miss Carter's backyard. She turned toward me, smiling wider. The barn, the pasture behind it. Technically, it might not be hers. Gasps rippled through the room. Joel flipped open the folder and skimmed the top page. His brows furrowed. "I don't believe this," I said, stepping forward. "Jeff, my realtor, he ran the title. Everything was clean. I have insurance. I have escrow paperwork. You can't just say you've owned something and make it true." Karen didn't blink. "Then I guess we'll let the county courthouse decide." The room burst into chaos. Marlene stood up, face red. "You're not doing this because of some dusty land claim. You're doing this because she embarrassed."
You? Because she wouldn't be bullied. Joel pounded the gavel on the folding table. "Order. Everyone sit down." Karen sat calm as ever. Joel looked up from the papers. "This isn't a finalized legal case. It's a claim filed by an individual without confirmation."
Of accuracy, it holds no bearing over the HOA's decision-making. He glanced at me, then back to Karen. "But we will, as a board, formally acknowledge the actions Miss Whitmore has taken to harass, threaten, and endanger a member of this community tonight. Vote will determine whether Karen Whitmore is banned from all HOA meetings and community functions, and whether we recommend legal restraining measures." The tension in the room felt like a stretched rubber band, one snap away from chaos. The vote was quick. 4 members in favor of banning. Karen 1 abstained. She was out officially. You'd think I'd feel victorious, but as she stood and calmly gathered her things, her eyes met mine once more, and I knew she wasn't finished, not even close. That night I tried to breathe. I really did. I sat on the porch with Cooper curled at my feet. I sipped chamomile tea. The Texas night was quiet. Stars overhead, frogs croaking from the creek. Then I saw it, a flicker of light behind the barn, small, faint, like a glow from a lighter or the tip of a cigarette. I stood, heart pounding. No one was supposed to be back there. The gate had a padlock. The barn was empty. I crept down the steps, phone in one hand, pepper spray in the other. Cooper stayed close. Behind the light vanished as I approached. The gate was ajar, unlocked. I swallowed hard and opened it slowly. The barn door creaked as I stepped inside. Empty, mostly except for one thing. Hanging from a rusted nail was a piece of cardboard spray, painted in red. "Walk away or we burn it down." My knees went weak. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a threat. I called the sheriff. He came out, took photos, filed a report, promised increased patrols in the area, but I could tell from his tone, without proof, it was just another line in a growing list of problems. He suggested installing more cameras, maybe hiring a security patrol. I nodded. "But inside, I know. But if she gets the right judge to sign off on a hearing, you might have to prove ownership in court." A pause, and that's where it gets messy. My chest tightened. How messy she could stall you for months, maybe even try to freeze development, prevent you from fencing certain areas. In worst case scenarios, she could request a temporary injunction on parts of the land until it's sorted. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. So she loses the HOA power trip, and now she's turning this into a legal chess match. Jeff sighed. "Exactly. She's trying to wear you down, but I wasn't going anywhere." That evening, I made my decision. I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer, a woman named Melissa Hargrove, known across Central Texas for chewing up property cases like bubble gum. Melissa was direct, smart, and mad as hell when I showed her the photos and told her about Karen's history. "You're not just dealing with a neighbor," she said. "You're dealing with a narcissist who's been unchecked for too long, and you've got the rare thing that beats people like her." "What's that?" I asked. Receipts? She drafted a cease and desist letter by nightfall, filed a formal response to the land claim, sent a notice of intent to pursue damages. If Karen escalated, I slept better, knowing Melissa was on my side. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I had a chance to turn this nightmare around. But of course, Karen wasn't done yet, because just 3 days later, while Cooper and I were out for a walk in the back pasture, I saw something strange. At the edge of the creek, fresh tire tracks leading from the side road through the trees up the hill right toward my barn. Someone had driven across my property line, and when I got closer, I saw it buried halfway in the mud, a red plastic gas can. Empty, still dripping, the gas can gleamed in the fading evening light like a warning flare. It wasn't there that morning. I crouched beside it, heart pounding. The plastic was still damp, the handles smeared with what looked like muddy fingerprints. The smell, sharp, sour, unmistakable, filled the air. Gasoline Cooper growled low in his throat. I looked around. The tire tracks curved away from the barn, cutting through the pasture toward the road that ran behind Willow Creek. It was mostly overgrown. No reason for anyone to drive back there unless they were trying not to be seen. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and snapped photos of everything. The can, the tracks, even the smeared soil where it looked like the vehicle had spun out in the mud. Then I called the sheriff again. By the time Deputy Ramos arrived, the light had nearly faded. I led him down to the creek without saying a word, just handed him my phone. He crouched beside the gas can, frowning. "This is bad," he said. "No, kidding. Do you have any cameras facing the pasture?" I shook my head. "Only the barn porch and driveway. I didn't think anyone would try coming from the back." Ramos stood, brushing his hands off. "They're getting bolder. This is arson prep. You're lucky someone didn't light a match. Can you lift prints? We'll try. But if it was raining recently, and with the mud might be useless." He looked up at me, but should seriously consider staying somewhere else. "No," I said too quickly. Ramos blinked. "Madison, I'm not running. That's what she wants. And I've got a lawyer now. I'm not letting Karen or whoever she's got helping her scare me off my own land." He nodded. Slowly. "All right, but keep your cameras on. Maybe add one out back. And Madison, if anything happens again, call us immediately. Don't wait. Don't try to handle it alone. I won't, I promised." But I knew the truth. I was already handling it alone, because no matter how many reports I filed, how many neighbors clucked their tongues and shook their heads, it all came down to me and Cooper, against someone who believed the rules didn't apply to her. The next day, Melissa, my lawyer, called with news. Karen tried to escalate. She said bluntly, "She filed for an emergency injunction on your barn and pasture siting ownership dispute under active review." Luckily, the clerk flagged it as a frivolous filing and denied it. "Good," I said, pacing my kitchen, "but she's trying to lay groundwork." Melissa added, "If we don't shut this down with actual court orders, she'll keep circling like
a shark. What do we do? I'm filing a counterclaim, one that establishes your ownership and seeks damages for harassment, emotional distress, and vandalism. If we play this right, the court could bar her from setting foot on your property. A small spark of hope lit inside me. How long will it take depends on how fast the county clerk processes it. Weeks, maybe a month. A month is a long time, Melissa. I know, just hang tight. We've got the upper hand now. But Karen, she didn't care about legal hands. She
only cared about winning. 3 nights later, it was Cooper who saved us. I had just dozed off on the couch, a book open across my chest, when he started barking loud, wild, frantic. Then came the sound. Clink, clink. Like metal tapping glass, I rushed to the porch and froze. There, standing at the base of the steps, was a man. He wore a hoodie and jeans, and he was holding something in his hand, a lighter. He was flicking it on, off. At his feet, another red gas can. My stomach turned. "Hey!" I shouted. He looked up and I saw it, just a glimpse of his face in the light. Not Karen, but a man, late 20s maybe, scruffy beard, pale skin, wide eyes like a deer caught in headlights. He dropped the lighter and bolted. I ran after him, barefoot, heart-hammering. But he was fast. He leapt the fence at the edge of the pasture and vanished into the trees. Cooper barked and lunged, but didn't chase. I stood there, panting, staring into the shadows. He was gone. I called the sheriff again. Deputy Ramos arrived with another squad car this time. He brought a K9 unit who sniffed around the area but couldn't track the man past the trees. This time, they took the gas can and lighter as evidence. Doesn't matter if Karen lit the match or not. Ramos said, if she sent, someone will trace it back to her. Can you do that? We'll try. Cameras help. But you should know something. What? This wasn't random. That man, he knew where your cameras were. He stayed just out of sight. My stomach sank. So he's been watching me more than that, Ramos said grimly. He studied your routine. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I sat in the kitchen, lights off, Cooper beside me, and I thought about everything. The crushed flowers, the fake notices, the Polaroids, the easement claim, the fire threat, the man with the lighter. All of it pointed to one thing. Karen wasn't acting alone. Someone was helping her or doing her dirty work. And the scariest part, I didn't know who. The next day, I decided to go door to door, not to confront, to ask, to listen. And what I learned from one conversation, just one, would change everything. Because when I knocked on the door of the old Whitfield house, the one just pasted, Marlene's, a man opened the door. Tall, slim, brown buzzcut, mid-20s, the same.
Face from last night. But this time he wasn't holding a lighter. He was holding a mug that said Property Management, Whitmore Sons. And suddenly it all made sense. I stood frozen on the porch. The man blinked, confused for a second, then smiled politely. "Can I help you?" My voice caught in my throat. I could feel the blood draining from my face. That was him. The same guy from the other night. The lighter, the hoodie, the red gas can. But now he was calm, clean-shaven, holding a mug and wearing a T-shirt.
With the logo Whitmore Sons, Land Services, Fencing, Appraisals, Cleanup. Whitmore, Karen's last name. He wasn't just some random neighbor, he was her son. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Yes, I just moved into the Carter place. 2 lots over. Thought I'd come around, meet some of the neighbors. He smiled again. Nice big piece of land you've got. Must be a lot to keep up with. Sure is, I said, eyes scanning behind him. The hallway, the boots by the door, a clipboard on the side table with survey maps on it. He followed my gaze and chuckled. Sorry, the place is a bit of a mess. We run a property business out of here, my mum and me. You know how it is. Oh yeah, I said, keeping my tone light. You do a lot of work around Willow Creek? He nodded. Some fencing, mostly. Sometimes land assessments. My mum used to be on the HOA, so she knew who needed help. I could feel it in my chest. Rage mixing with fear. This man had been on my land with gas. With a lighter, I wanted to scream, to call the cops, but I held it in because I needed more. Anyway, I said, taking a step back. Nice meeting you, Ethan, he said. Right, Ethan. Well, welcome. Sorry, thank you. I mean, I'm the one who's new. I gave a fake laugh. Catch you around, I turned and walked away, slowly, calmly. But the moment I got around the corner of his driveway, I ran straight to my house, locked the doors, and called Melissa. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Madison, any news I found him?" "Who, the man who tried to burn my barn down?" Dead silence. "His name's Ethan Whitmore," I said, pacing the kitchen. "He lives 2 doors down. He runs a property business with Karen. He's her son, Melissa." She exhaled hard. "That explains. The access, the knowledge, how he knew where the cameras were. He's not just helping her, he's doing the dirty work." Melissa's tone sharpened. "We need to escalate. I'll file a protective order request first thing in the morning, and we'll notify the sheriff's office again." "You think he'll try something else?" "I think people like that don't stop unless you force them to." She wasn't wrong, because the very next day I got a notice in my mailbox. Not a fake one this time, a real letter from the county. Zoning board notice of potential property violation. Unauthorized structure expansion without permit. I stared at it. Mouth open, the barn. Karen and her son had reported it as new construction illegal. Construction claimed I built it after closing. Without a permit. It didn't matter that it was 100 years old, that it had peeling paint and rusted hinges. They'd reported it. I spent the rest of that day on the phone chasing down records, photos, anything to prove it had been there long before I moved in. Meanwhile, Marlene dropped by. She brought banana bread and a USB stick. "What's this?" I asked. "Security footage," she said. "From my driveway cam. Catches part of your back fence." My hand shook as I plugged it in. And there he was, clear as day, Ethan walking down the property line with a gas can 3 nights ago, hood up, moving slow. We had him. Melissa filed the footage along with a full harassment timeline to the sheriff's office that same night. 2 days later, I got a knock on the door. It was Ramos this time with a warrant. "We're bringing him in," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. "You really going to arrest him?" I asked. Ramos nodded. "We have enough now between the footage. The past incident reports the new zoning fraud. It's a pattern, and judges don't like patterns. They picked up Ethan that afternoon. Karen was there, screaming, crying, trying to throw herself between him and the squad car. They don't belong here," she shrieked. "This is our land. She stole it. You're arresting the wrong people." The officers didn't listen. They drove off with Ethan in cuffs, and just like that, for the first time in weeks, and the neighborhood was quiet, but the quiet didn't
last, because 2 nights later, just before midnight, I got a call from Melissa. Her voice was urgent, rushed. "Madison, you need to leave the house." "What now?" "Grab Cooper. Get in the car. I just got word from Ramos. Karen paid Ethan's bail, and they think she might try something."
Tonight, my blood ran cold. But no buts. Ramos is on his way, but you have to go. I grabbed my coat, shoved my feet into boots, threw Cooper's leash on, and ran for the truck. As I reversed down the driveway, my headlights swept across something that
made my chest tighten. A figure standing near the barn, a flash of silver in their hand, a match already lit. The match flared to life, burning bright for half a second before vanishing in the wind. But that half second was enough. It was Karen Her. Face twisted in a grimace of rage, her eyes wide mouth moving in a silent scream as my headlights locked onto her. She was holding a crumpled piece of cloth soaked and dripping. She was going to burn the barn down again. I slammed the brakes. Cooper barked wildly in the back seat, clawing at the window. Karen froze for a heartbeat, then dropped the cloth and took off, disappearing into the brush behind the pasture. I threw the truck into park, jumped out, and grabbed the fire extinguisher from my head.
The porch! The rag hissed. Smoke curled into the air, but the fire hadn't caught. I stomped it out just as Ramos's cruiser skidded into the driveway, lights flashing. "Hands in the air! Hands in the air!" he shouted, sprinting toward me. "It's not me," I yelled, backing up, hands raised. It was her, Karen. "She was here," he barked, pulling out his radio. Unit 12, suspect sighted. Fleeing. Carter. Property. Northeast direction, through the pasture. Repeat. Suspect Karen Whitmore. White. Female, late 50s. Fleeing on
Foot! Another officer leapt from the car, flashlight in hand, and ran after her into the trees. I stood there, panting, my entire body shaking. Ramos looked at me, his face hard. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think so. She didn't get a fire started, just the rag."
But she tried. He crouched beside the scorched cloth. "Sniffed it, Diesel," he muttered. She was serious this time. That was the final straw. The next morning, the sheriff's department filed official charges: attempted arson, harassment, trespassing, and accessory to vandalism. They placed Karen under arrest. At her home later that day, she didn't go quietly. Neighbors said she was dragged out in tears, still screaming about how the wrong kind of people were poisoning Willow Creek, as if her reign of control, fear, and petty terror had somehow protected the neighborhood from what people planting flowers. But this time, nobody came to defend her, not even the few allies she'd had left. Marlene baked a fresh pie and brought it over with a tired smile. "It's over," she said, resting the dish on my counter. "Took us years, but you ended it." I shook my head. "She's not just going to disappear. People like her always find a way back." Marlene smiled sadly. "Maybe, but not here. Not again." And she was right, because 2 weeks later, the HOA board passed a unanimous bylaw banning any member with a criminal record involving harassment, trespassing, or property damage from ever serving in an official capacity. Again, Karen's name was erased from all neighborhood records. Ethan vanished, rumor had it. He left town, started working up north. I never saw him again. Melissa helped me finalize a restraining order, and the zoning board cleared all false claims on my barn and pasture. But the scars, those would take time to heal. Sometimes I still walk the pasture with Cooper, watching the trees, listening for footsteps. I keep the cameras up. The porch light stays on, but the land is mine now, truly mine. And with every morning I wake up to the sound of birds instead of Karen's voice. Every evening I sit on the porch with the Texas sun slipping below the trees. I remember what this fight was for. It wasn't just about property lines or fake notices or old grudges. It was about standing up for myself, for what I'd worked for peace. Sometimes evil doesn't wear a mask or hide in the dark. Sometimes it lives across the street with a fake smile and a clipboard. And when it does, you fight back. Not with hate, but with proof. With community, with courage. I still get letters from the HOA, real one. Now, Holiday invites community cookout flyers. I even joined the garden club just to make sure those wildflowers in front of my porch stay planted for good. And Cooper, he's a hero around here now. Marlene crocheted him a little sheriff's badge for his collar. So to anyone watching this who's ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, a neighbor from hell, or someone who thinks they can break you with intimidation, remember, my story, Karen called the cops on me because she thought I was stealing from a home that I owned, but in the end, she was the one who lost everything. And me, I found more than a home. I found the strength to never back down again.